Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. I just used 36 minutes going through the Heirloom Rose website, and I actually wanted to do a video where you can follow me, but I realized with 980 rose varieties and 41 pages it will take forever, but I'm going to link that video at the end of this one so you can see it if you want. But I'm going to give you the cliff notes now of really me spending forever going through the Heirloom Rose website. And the reason I did that is I noticed 60% of you, or 16% of you are from America. And you often can't get the German Tanta roses and a lot of other roses I show here from Europe. So I thought I'd have a look what is available in America. And I'm going to give you the cliff notes now, of course, what I would buy if I lived in America. But let's get started here and let's have a look. Yeah, the first one I'll get would of course be Velvet Fragrance. Such a potent, fragrant red rose. It is a 10 out of 10 on fragrance. A wonderful damask, citrus, fruity fragrance on this one. Has such a complex fragrance. And as you can see here, Heirloom Roses actually writes down here the most fragrant of all deep roses. And I really agree with that. So let's continue. The next one I'll get would be Princess Celine de Monaco. You can actually get this one. Princess Celine de Monaco. This one is really a no-brainer. It is my highest ranked rose for a reason. Wonderful health, wonderful flowers, wonderful fragrance, wonderful color change. Just an amazing rose and a no-brainer, really. And let's go to the next one. The next one was actually Deep Secret. Deep Secret you can also get. Deep Secret or Mildred Chill is such a wonderful, healthy red rose. Each of my Deep Secret out in the garden right now are like forming 12 blooms at a time. And when you compare to how big the blooms are and how wonderful they are for cut flower, and also that potent 8.5 out of 10 scent and the beautiful look of this rose, honestly, this is one of the best red roses for health, flowering, and fragrance. It is a very hard combination to beat. I don't think Mr. Lincoln beats it or Papa Milan, and you can get these roses on here along with Fragrant Cloud. And I think Mr. Lincoln, Fragrant Cloud, and Papa Milan are really good red roses to grow if you live in the southern parts of the US. But if you live in the moderate to northern parts of the US, I would definitely say go with Deep Secret over these roses. But let's quickly go over. You have Fragrant Cloud. A really good rose to grow if your winters not on the wrong side of zone 7B, I would say. Yeah, very fruity, very big blooms that are just more orange red, I say. Very fruity. Good rose to grow if you're in the more warm zones. You also have something like a Double Delight. Another really fragrant. Where did it go? Double Delight. Strange. Never bring. Oh, there it is. Double Delight. I don't know why the search didn't catch that one. But another really potent fruity fragrance is about an 8 out of 10. Wonderful rose if you're in one of the warmer areas. And then you have Mr. Lincoln, of course. Mr. Lincoln is a very powerful fragrant rose, about a 9 out of 10. I don't like it on health as much as I like Deep Secret or Velvet Fragrance. But it is a very good red rose to grow if you're in one of the warmer areas of the US. Not really if you're in one of the colder areas. And then you have Papa Milan. Papa Milan is another one of those 9 out of 10 really fragrant roses. Really good if you live in a warm zone. I would be more careful if you live in a zone that is below 7B, really, because this one doesn't like getting that cold. If you go to like a minus 15 Celsius, then you're going to be in problems with this one. Often the same with Mr. Lincoln. Something like Earth Angel here, I'd also skip unless you live in the very warm parts of the US. It is a 7.5 citrus fragrance, but it balls up quite badly with rain and moisture, which really ruins it in the more wet areas of the US. And let's continue. You have Francis Milan. Francis Milan is actually also very powerful fragrant. It just gets a bit ruined. It is an 8 out of 10 on fragrance, but it gets a bit ruined by a tea fragrant note at the back end that doesn't really fit in. But it is a very fragrant rose. Then you also have Delish. Delish is one of my all-time favorite citrus scented roses. An 8.5 out of 10 citrus fragrant rose. Wonderful hardy also. You can grow it almost anywhere. I really like that one. And then you have, I can't remember what they called it here. They call it Sweet Mademoiselle here. It is named different things across the world. But Sweet Mademoiselle is a really good Milan rose for fragrance and also for health. A really, really good rose to grow. And what else did we have here? I think we had, something like Eden Rose is also a good rose to grow for health and floriferousness. And you had Julia Child, also really good for health and floriferousness. And then you have Olivia Austin, another extremely healthy and floriferous rose. And then we have Colette, another extremely good and floriferous rose. And of course, these 4 roses are not that scented, but they're amazing roses. Really don't skip on this one. I can't remember if you can get Princess Anne in America, could you? I actually can't remember if they had that one. No, they didn't, but it is a good rose also. Let's do another really fragrant rose, Margaret Merrill. Margaret Merrill is a wonderful white fragrant rose. Really potent, 8.5 citrus scent on this one. I really like it. A really wonderful white rose on fragrance. And I also noticed that they had a Capella, actually. And a Capella is actually a really good fragrant Tantar rose. It is more this kind of in the middle between pink and purple, but it has this outer edge on the backside of the petals that are more silver. It gets more vertical in growth, but you also shouldn't box it in. It likes its space because often if you box it in and it is in competition, then it really stops blooming. But if you handle it the right way, it'll do very well for you on fragrance. And what else did we have? I have to remember now. I think the most important ones are, they also did have Dark Desire, I should probably touch on. Dark Desire is not my favorite red rose for a reason. It is because if you cut it and take it inside, it tends to shatter. And if you have it outside, it spends forever in the budding phase, and it can get wiped out by weather in that time. It takes forever to make a flower, really, like 3 weeks sometimes. And if you're like, oh, now it's pretty in the budding phase and I'll just take it inside and keep it in there to avoid it getting ruined, often it tends to shatter for you in the vase. Something like Deep Secret is much more reliable than Dark Desire, and Velvet Fragrance is also much more reliable. What else did we have? We had Rose Direct. Rose Direct is such a wonderful historic rose to grow. Wonderful perfume on it. There's the Mask and the Gallica fragrance that meets. Wonderful fragrant rose, about an 8 out of 10. It is the same with Jack Kachi here. Another wonderful fragrant rose of the historic roses. And the beauty of both Jack Kachi and Rose Direct is you can keep them really compact in shape, which makes them fit into a modern garden. While a lot of the other historic roses tends to get very huge. So those are also some really good roses to get. And I always feel like I'm forgetting something here, but there were also like 41 pages. So, but yeah, I think these are the ones I would really highlight on heirloom roses that you can get. One thing I have noticed though is, holy moly, roses in America are so expensive, like $50 to $60. That is just crazy. In Europe, you pay like 10 to 15 euros, and if you go to really cheap places, you can pay like 5 euros. I also know in England, roses are actually very expensive, like 35 pounds for Austrian roses, like 22 pounds for Harkness and Peter Beals. In Europe, Harkness roses, actually, if you buy them in mainland Europe, you can often get them for like 10 euros or something like that. So I know those roses are really expensive across the English-speaking world. I have heard in the US, the reason roses are so expensive is because you have very strict import rules. Like in America, roses have to sit in quarantine for 2 years, and there's no skipping that quarantine. While in Europe, if you pay someone to check the rose for diseases and see if it's healthy, then you can get a plant passport, and then you can import the rose right away if you're willing to pay that expense. So you don't have to wait the full 2 years. But in America, it sounds like roses do have to wait the full 2 years, and that adds a lot of expense for the growers of roses. And then after those 2 years are over, they also have to make deals with these middlemen in the US. There's like 4 of them. And these middlemen actually want a lot of money from the rose breeders to introduce the roses to the plant nurseries. So you have a lot of middlemen taking profits from the rose breeders and making the whole supply chain more expensive out to the plant nurseries. And then I have also heard that there's a lot of different red tape between each of the individual states in America, how you can export plants across state borders. So I can understand why roses in America gets expensive, but I really think like $50 to $60 is so expensive. Let me know, guys, if it really is that expensive, or if Heirloom Roses is one of the more expensive places, because I don't know everything there is to know about roses in America. Some of you probably know much more than I do, but I have really noticed that the pricing in America seems quite expensive, for sure. And I also think roses in England seem quite expensive, like I mentioned with Harkness roses, that they're so much cheaper in mainland Europe. But I think the reason roses are cheap in mainland Europe is a lot of these rose breeders, like you have Paulson Roses doing 50 million roses. You have a lot of the small breeders doing 4 million. Then you have some of the big nurseries like Milan. I can't remember if Milan does 10 million or 15 million. But if you take Europe, you probably have like, I would guess like between 150 to 200 million roses being produced. And that is really a lot. Like that leads to a very large, how to say it, a very large offering of roses. And of course that brings prices down, that you have so many roses being produced. But I really noticed across America that roses seem very expensive. So I think in some ways it is good I can share my experience with you, because if I lived in America and had to pay 50 to 60 roses, then honestly I might be ruined because that is a lot. I wouldn't try as many rose varieties like I have now if I had to pay 50 to 60 per rose. I also noticed in America that a lot of the rare roses can get insanely expensive. In Europe, when you have a rare variety, insanely expensive is like $30 to $40 or something like that. But I've noticed in a lot of other countries they can go to like $200 sometimes. It's just crazy for me for when you're sitting here in Europe and know how cheap these roses are at to breed out in the nurseries. They don't cost that much more. I have bred roses myself, and I know that the light, the water, the fertilizer, and all that, even in a hobby setting, that is about €5 per rose at most. So when they're sold in America for like $50, I'm just like, someone must be making a lot of money on that. But that is just my opinion. But yeah, I'll link the other video at the end of this so you can see me go through all the different pages. It is going to be a long video, so you take from it what you want. If you want to watch it, watch it. If you want to skip now, just skip it. So yeah, that was it. Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. I do apologize a bit for the video quality today because I was out recording with a DSLR and I didn't have time to replug it to the PC. So what you're seeing now is the webcam. But I thought we'd go over one of the biggest American rose sites today called Heirloom roses. And the reason I want to do that is I realized that 16% of you who watch this channel is from America, and you often can't get a lot of the Tanta roses and the European roses I'm recommending. So I thought we'd go over some really good options you have in America from the Heirloom website. So without further ado, let's get started here, and I'll just close down the webcam here and bring up Heirloom roses, and we'll start to go over it here. So let's see, shop roses. Let's see what Heirloom roses has. And I think we'll begin here. Yeah, Earth Angel, balls up in the rain, 7.5 citrus fragrance. Honestly, only grow this if you're in a very dry spot with not a lot of humidity. Coco Logo, beautiful color, not really one for fragrance. Eden Climber, an absolute must-have for health and floriferousness and that special look. Not for fragrance though, but an amazing climbing rose. Golden Celebration, only a 6 out of 10 tea fragrance. Appetite, not really the most strong and fragrant. You're lucky if it's a 7.5, but I've heard people in America saying it does better, but here in Europe I haven't really been that pleasantly surprised with it. So my recommendation is go to the nursery and send it yourself. Lady of Charlotte, only a 4 out of 10 tea fragrance. Let's continue. Polka, not really that fragrant. Woolton Old Hall is an amazing rose and fragrance. Really potent myrrh fragrance. This one is a must-have. The first must-have on this list, besides Eden Rose. Madame Anisette can do okay. It has this more licorice scent, but really not one of my favorites. But a lot of people like it. Margaret Merrill, really potent citrus fragrance. My absolute favorite white rose at the moment. So that one is a must for me on fragrance. Really amazing fragrance. Twilight Zone, it has decent fragrance. It's not that cold hardy though, and that kind of lets it down. But really special color. And let's continue here. Yeah, Kiss Me Kate. Kiss Me Kate is an amazing climbing rose. Very potent, 8 out of 10 citrus fragrance. Then you have Westland. Westland is more like a 7 for me. My dad has grown this one for 20 years. It is not the most fragrant rose. It has a really unique color change, but in my opinion, Kiss Me Kate is the one to go with. And let's continue. I've heard a lot of people talk really good about Bolero. I haven't grown it for a long time, but I think it does better if you live in the southern parts of the US. Perfuma Summer Romance. Perfuma Summer Romance is really a good one from the Perfuma collection. Very decent damask fragrance on it. Tends to get quite big though. So be careful where you place it. Yeah, Beverly is another really fragrant rose, an amazing fragrant rose actually. I haven't done a review of this one yet, but I actually think it will rank about an 8.5. On a good day, it can be a bit more scented, but I think 8.5 is where it ends up. Then let's continue. Yeah, the Impressionist I've actually seen in America be really amazing for color in a climbing rose. I haven't grown it myself, can't get a hold of it. Compassion is one of those 7.5 fruity fragrant roses. Doesn't tend to bloom a lot as of late for me, so I still go Kiss Me Kate. And let's continue. Yeah, Leonardo da Vinci is one of those always in constant bloom Milan roses. It just feels a bit mechanical, a bit boring. It has nearly no fragrance. Therese Brunet is one of those Canadian roses you can grow if you're in a very cold area. And let's see here. Yeah, Jasmine, stay away from. Gets diseases and only tends to bloom in a few flushes and then it looks boring the rest of the time. Bonica is actually a good low maintenance rose. It is just sometimes a bit boring to grow in my opinion. Not really a lot of fragrance either. An iceberg can get black spot, but really floriferous iceberg. Fragrant Plum is one of those I haven't had the opportunity to grow myself, but I've heard so many people in America say it is very fragrant. Julia Child. Julia Child is an amazing yellow rose. I really like Julia Child. Oh, sorry, it is only a 6 out of 10 on licorice fragrance, but it is an amazing rose for color change and for flowering and for health. It is amazing in so many ways. And let's continue here. And what else do we have? We have Florentina I stay away from, gets a lot of black spot also. Lucidia is actually one of my favorite historic roses on fragrance. It is an 8 out of 10 damask fragrance, but it does get black spot though, and it can get laggy if you try to grow it as a bush. And let's continue down here. Delish, and Delish is actually an amazing citrus fragrant rose, like 8.5. Wonderful rose actually. And let's continue down here. Madame Isaac Pirea is another really wonderful raspberry scented historic climbing rose. Really strong, potent fragrance on Madame Isaac Pirea. And Colette is kind of like Eden Rose, always in constant bloom, wonderful color change, and extremely healthy and floriferous. It is a really good rose to place in those spots you always want to look pretty, just like Eden Rose is. And let's continue here. I've heard Gentle Hermione do well for a lot of people, claiming it is very myrrh fragrant. I want to grow it myself this coming bare root season. But yeah, I've heard good things about it. And let's continue down here. Yeah, Jacquetia is an amazing historic rose, one of my absolute favorites, and it is also very fragrant, and it likes to rebloom also, which is quite good, and it can be kept at a nice shape also, unlike most historic roses. Let's go down here and see what else. Oh, Ballerina. Ballerina is actually a very decent musk rose. I think these days I tend to prefer the one, what is it called? It's called something like a Heavenly. There are some new varieties, in my opinion, that beats Ballerina. The one I think is really good, though, is Red Ballerina, if one can get it. And let's continue here. Yeah, not really seeing a lot of fragrant things here. The Princess Trust can be quite fragrant, but in my opinion, it comes with some health issues. Aloha is like a 6.5 to 7. It has this spicy pepper note and apple fragrance to it. Not really the most strong and potent on fragrance though, but it is very pretty and it likes to bloom a lot. and also quite decently healthy, that one. Let's go down here and see what else we have. There's a lot of roses I actually don't know, but I think that's how it goes when you can't get a lot of these roses in Europe. You just don't encounter them, really. Winter Sunset I have is decent, but not really for frames. Duchess de Montebello. Honestly, so far it hasn't been that great in my garden, but yeah, I think there's better historic roses. And we'll continue down here. There's actually a lot of roses here. I think there's like 900 something roses. So I'm just skipping over a lot of them because a lot of them I don't know. So I'm really screening for the ones I do know. And it is because, there's Acapella. Acapella is actually a really fragrant Tanta rose. 8 out of 10 on fragrance. Amazing damask fragrance on that one. I do like one thing about it. It has this kind of silver effect going on at the backside of the petals. Tends to get upright though, and you really don't want to plant it too close to anything else because often it tends to stop blooming if it gets squeezed by anything. So give that one some space and grow it more upright, and it provides a wonderful fragrance. Let's go down here and see what else we have. Oh, we're only at page 10 out of 40, man. There's a lot of roses here. I actually wasn't expecting that. Robusta rose is a terrible rose in my opinion. It's like 2 meters tall and so spiky. I don't like that one. Emily Bronte is decent, 7.5 to an 8 on fragrance. What I don't like about it is if you live a very windy place, it can fall over and snap at the base. So if you live a more quiet place where there's not a lot of wind, it's still a good rose, even though it wants to get tall. But if you live in a more windy region, I'd stay away from that one. And let's continue here. Easygoing is one of those low maintenance roses that are constantly in bloom, but not for fragrance. Let's continue. Oh, Rose de Rech, one of my all-time favorite historic roses. Absolutely amazing for scent, and you can keep it quite compact, and it is just a beautiful rose. Honestly, even if you like only modern roses, I think Rose de Rech is really a must grow in your garden for the historic roses. White Pet is one of those very, very small flowered ones, but really quite, it is such a cute rose, and a lot of time is in constant bloom. Amazing rose, really, but not always the strongest on fragrance. I remember it as like a 7 or something like that. Let's continue. Yeah, there's a lot of... Oh, Alba Milan is one of those roses I really hate nearly because there's not much special about it. And it sends out these long horizontal canes that are really annoying to deal with. Cloud 9 is another one I really hate because Cloud 9 is always described as very potently fragrant. But honestly, the fragrance on it is so much like an ashtray, like a wet tobacco ashtray. I really don't like the... I will not call it fragrant. I'll call it more stinky, to be honest. It is a stinky rose. But yeah, let's continue here. Let's see. Yeah, Cafe Facette is one I have never had success with. A lot of places will claim it has a very strong citrus fragrance, but I've been putting my nose into so many Cafe Facette roses, and I have never been able to detect that fragrance. I have tried it for months on end to see if I got just a little whiff of fragrance from it, but no success. And let's go down. Bucao is another one of those really good musk roses. It gets very big though, and I prefer red ballerina. And let's continue here and see what we have. Yeah, there we have Baron Chiraud de la Lane. And it is decently fragrant, like 7.5, but what you really grow it for is the white outer edges. That said, it is not always the healthiest and most frost-tolerant historic rose. And let's continue down here. Let's see what else we have. There's so many roses here. I'm actually surprised by how many roses there are. Yeah, but when Isabella is not one you grow for fragrance, it's only 6 out of 10 fragrant. But it is such a unique looking cream yellow to a white rose that honestly this one is a really good rose to get that romantic look in your garden, that cottage garden look. I really like that one. Just not for fragrance. And let's continue here. Yeah, Raspberry Cupcake is another one of those really good fragrant Parfuma series roses. In my opinion, if you only had to get 2 roses from the Parfuma collection, it'll be Summer Romance and Raspberry Cupcake. Those are actually quite decent, even though a Raspberry Cupcake doesn't really stand up to the rain that well. It can get water damaged on the blooms when it rains. A really powerful citrus fragrance on that one. And let's continue here. Yeah, Max Chagall actually also has a bit of fragrance, like a 7 out of 10, I'd say. But it also has some health issues. Carding Mill I actually heard do very, very well from a lot of people. I just haven't been able to track it down myself. Mr. Lincoln is an absolutely fragrant rose, a 9 out of 10. It is especially a good rose to grow if you're in the southern parts of the US. It loves the more warm weather. It is not as winter hardy, but really good red rose to grow if you live in a southern place. Yeah, Queen of Sweden is a good rose for that special water lily effect when viewed from the side. And Double Delight is actually quite fruity in the mass standard, like an 8 to an 8.5. Again, it is a better rose if you live in a warm place because it is not always as cold hardy, but a really good fragrant rose. The Pilgrim is not really fragrant at all, only a 6 out of 10 tea fragrance, but it is in constant bloom, however. Distant Drums I've heard good things about. I have sadly not been able to get it. It is constantly sold out here. Crown Princess Margrethe is actually decent on fragrance. It is like a 7 or sometimes a 7.5 on fragrance. It just takes forever to get established, like 4 years, but once it is established, it does really well and gives a lot of blooms, but it is a rose to be very patient with. And then you have Princess Céline de Monaco. Princess Céline de Monaco is the highest rated rose on my channel on all factors. I think I scored it like, was it 45 or 64 points out of 50? Really amazing rose, both on fragrance and on looks. This one, in my opinion, a must-have. And let's continue here and see what else we have. Yeah, Claire Austin is not really for me. Doesn't give me as many blooms and not that powerful fragrance, only a 7 out of 10. Then you have Life of the Party. I've heard good things about this one on Color Change. Haven't been able to track it down here in Europe. Sugar Moon, I've heard, has a very powerful fragrance. Sadly, it was sold out for me this season. I've heard good things about it. Then you have Poet's Wife. The Poet's Wife is a clear 9 out of 10 for me. One of the most fragrant, if not the most fragrant, yellow rose. A really good Austin rose. And let's continue down here. There's so many roses. Just Joey and Rock and Roll. Just Joey is actually decently fragrant. About I think it was an 8 out of 10. Not that cold hardy though, but a very special color, just like Abby de Cluny. And then you have Rock and Roll. Rock and Roll is also, I think it was an 8 out of 10 for me. One of the better striped roses, along with Sentimental. Dark Desire. It has a very good fragrance, about 8 to an 8.5 out of 10. The problem with it is if you use it as a cut flower, it quickly shatters, and when you take it inside in a vase, and it is also not that floriferous, and the health doesn't always feel that vigorous on it. So it has some issues in my opinion, and it wouldn't be my first pick, even though it does look impressive. Then you have Strawberry Hill. Strawberry Hill actually gives a bit of a fragrance to it, like a 6 to a 7, a sweet, fruity fragrance. But it is not the strongest on fragrance, and it is also not the most floriferous always. Let's continue. Bliss Perfumer. It looks wonderful. It's also really healthy, just not that fragrant. Then you have Alchemist. Alchemist is a really good historic rose, once blooming, gets quite huge, but really unique color on that one. And let's continue here. Laguna. A lot of people will claim Laguna is very potently fragrant, but honestly it is a 6 on fragrance at most. And this picture doesn't capture the color on it. It is much more orange in color in reality. And Velvet Fragrance. That is my absolutely best red rose in my garden, and I have over 50 red roses, different varieties at the moment. And this one is absolutely the most fragrant of them all. A 10 out of 10 for me. Wonderful fragrance if you can get it. Poseidon, I don't really like growing, no fragrance on it at all. And let's continue. Love Song, a bit more fragrant than the other one, but and also a bit bigger in the blooms and more loosely formed bloom shape. But I really tend to like Pacific Blue over these two. Then you have Francis Milan. Francis Milan actually have a very potent fragrance. The only problem with it is the fragrance tends to get ruined by a bit of tea note at the back end. And let's continue down here. Deep Secret. Deep Secret is one of my all-time favorite red roses. It is extremely healthy and extremely floriferous, much more than Dark Desire, Mr. Lincoln, and even Velvet Fragrance. But it is only an 8.5 on fragrance. It is still so wonderfully fragrant and still a very potent fragrance. It is just not the highest, but when you consider the health on this one, and also the fact that it is a really good cut rose, honestly, if you live in the northern parts to the more moderate parts of the United States, I would go with Deep Secret over Mr. Lincoln for sure. And let's see what else we have down here. I have heard Bathsheba do well for some people. I haven't grown it that much myself, but I have heard some say it has a good fragrance. Olivia Rose Austin is a really good rose for health and flowering. Not that fragrant though, only a 4 out of 10. Very light fragrance. Let's continue. Yeah, Black Baccara is such an unhealthy rose. It gives very few blooms and no fragrance at all. Gertrude Jekyll is extremely damask fragrant, like an 8.5 out of 10. Only issue is black spot and defoliating. Strike It Rich is a very unique yellow looking rose, but it gets insanely tall, like 2 meters sometimes in tall. But it does look very special. No fragrance though to really talk about. And let's continue down here and see what else we have. Yeah, not really getting that much here. There's a lot I don't know because they're American roses. First Crush. Yeah, there's a lot of things here one can skip. Moonstone is actually quite pretty. It kind of reminds me of Eden Rose. Just not that great a growth habit on it, and it can get quite leggy. And also not the best for fragrance. Alfred Sisley can actually have a bit of a fragrance. I think it's like a 7 out of 10 on fragrance. It has a pretty effect, but not always the most healthy either. I've heard a lot of people talk good about stainless steel. It has always been sold out, and I haven't been able to get a hold of it. Then you have a Blanc Double de Coubert and Coubert. It is very fragrant, very sweet fragrant, but it does tend to run at the root and get quite big because it's an Rugosa rose. Jacqueline Dupre, wonderful look, just not that healthy and not that fragrant. Tuscany Superb, again one of those once blooming historic roses. Has an amazing look to it, but I really let down on scent. Abbe de Cluny, kind of the same as Just Joey. A wonderful color. You don't get on a lot of other roses, but not always the most cold hardy. And we'll continue here. Fragrant Cloud is actually a really good one for fragrance. Very huge bloom on that one, and it is this more orange red. But wonderful fruity fragrance, like an 8 out of 10. It is one of the better roses to grow if you live in a warmer climate, because it is not always the most cold hardy of roses. But it is a very good fragrant rose. And let's continue down here. Yeah, a lot of people say Sunsprite is very fragrant. I haven't been able to give mine that much fragrance, to be honest with you. At most a 7 out of 10. I hear some people say it's very fragrant in America. So, in my opinion, go to the nursery and have a whiff of it and see what it gives you. Halocar, it is often an 8 out of 10, but not always the most reliable on fragrance. Really good for creating that cottage look, and a really hardy rose. Only problem is if you place it up against something, it can get powdery mildew. Princess Alexander of Kent. This one actually has a good fragrance, a 7.5 out of 10, and it gets huge blooms, but the health on it is not that great, and it tends to defoliate itself and get bare stems. Big Purple, wonderful rose, just not the best purple rose for fragrance. Yeah, let's continue. There's so many roses here, really. Yeah, Rainy Victoria is a real classic in the historic roses. Does get quite big though. I tend to prefer Jack Cartier and Rose Direct. Penelope, a wonderful little musk rose, but really not for a fragrance. Rosamundi. Rosamundi actually doesn't have that potent and gallic scent, but it is once blooming. So, in my opinion, it is a very interesting rose historically, but nowadays I'd grow Ferdinand Pichard over it. Sweet Mademoiselle is actually a really good fragrant French rose that's also quite healthy. This one is one for sure that I would get if I lived in America. And let's continue down here. Yeah, there's so many different roses, but not much is really. Pride of England is not that fragrant. Chinatown, also not that fragrant. Yeah, there's so many roses here. Wild Blue Yonder actually has a very special color. It's just not that good for fragrance, like a 6 out of 10. Pascali, another one of those, very pretty, not that good for fragrance. Comte de Chambord is actually really good for fragrance. It has the Gertrude Jekyll fragrance. It does tend to ball up though when it rains. The McCartney rose is actually really fragrant, part of the perfumer collection. Oh, sorry, not perfumer collection. It's part of the what is it called? The sweet perfume de Provence, or the Provence roses from Milan. It does get quite tall though. Easy does it. Amazing rose for flowering, just not for scent. Buff Beauty is actually a very potently scented musk rose of the historic roses. It has a very beautiful look to it. Can get quite big though. Hansa is again a very potently scented rugosa rose, but in my opinion a bit too wild. And let's continue. Friedrich Mistral is actually a very scented too, but it is also part of the Provence series. And the problem with that series is they get quite big in height. And they're also not always the most cold hardy. So some of them you can only place in zone 7B. So if you live colder, it's not really the best. And we'll continue here. Let's see what else we have. So many roses. But what were I expecting? There's 980 roses here. We'll continue. Betty White. Stanwell Perpetual is actually a very good rose for flowering. It can get a black spot a lot though. I don't really like it that much. But it does tend to flower a lot. Julio Iglesias is actually decently fragrant. I think it was like 7.5 last I scented it. Yeah, Souvenir de Malmaison, another one of those low-growing, beautiful historic roses, just not the best on scent. And we'll continue. Roald Dahl is actually a very pretty rose for a pot, but the problem is not that fragrant, but really beautiful in a pot. And we'll continue here. We'll get to the end of these 980 roses. Desdemona is not always as fragrant, or it is not as fragrant as people say. Often it's only giving a 6.5 to a 7, a very faint fragrance on this one. It does look beautiful though, placed in a pot, but it is also not always the most floriferous. So in my opinion, it is one of the Austins you can skip. Salé is actually a really good reblooming moss rose. And Maurice Autrillo is one of those roses, if you grow in a more... it tends to fade out to different colors. Depending on the climate you grow in, it can get completely yellow or it can get very red. So this one is one of those you really can't... look on the color of the picture and expect that is the color you're going to get. It is not also that fragrant, like a 6 out of 10. Bernstein Rose, again, not a fragrant rose. And we'll continue down here. Let's see. There's so many roses here. Dolly Parton, Velvet Abundance. Velvet Abundance I've not had that good luck with, but Captain John Ingram is actually a decent moss rose. It is, I also believe that is one of the ones that can rebloom a little bit, like Soleil. But the thing to always be careful with on the moss roses is they can sometimes get into absolute beasts like Henry Martin. And let's continue. So many roses here, really. Yeah, let's see. Champagne cocktail. Actually, I haven't seen that one in for a while. Yeah, I think we have been through all the good ones. These ones seems to be more. Oh, there was a Ispahan there. Ispahan is actually a really good historic rose, very fragrant. Just gets huge, kind of like Kazan Lake, and then it only blooms once. But it is one of those that's used in the perfume production. Yeah, Sir John, it is not really one of those you want to get for fragrance. Let's continue down here and see what else we have. So many roses, really. But so far, nothing really sticks out to me. Like I love many of these roses, they're just not that fragrant. And then there are some of the American bred ones I haven't tried myself. Oh, Marie Curie is actually a German rose. Not that fragrant though. Oh, that's Queen Margaret. That is a Danish rose. Not that fragrant either, but Prairie Sunrise is actually a really good. These what is it called? Pimpinifolia or something like that. I think it's called. And but they get very tall. But it has a very beautiful color change. Then you have Papa Milan. Papa Milan is actually a very fragrant 9 out of 10 rose. It is a better rose to grow if you're in the southern parts of the US because it is not that cold hardy. But let's get down and see what else we have here. Yeah, not really that. Blush Noisette is actually a very pretty Noisette rose, a very pretty climber. Not the most fragrant, but it has a very unique look to it. Alfred Colomb is another very good red reblooming historic rose. But yeah, I think that was it. Like we have been through the whole catalog now. Yeah, that's it.